I think us as humans, we have a lot more resiliency in us. You'd be amazed at how far that line will go when your back's against the wall or when in a life or death situation. You can really dig deep, but that resiliency and that heart connection that I love to make with people is incredibly powerful. And for me, that's what life is all about. When we can connect on that heart level, that's pretty special.
Hey everyone, this is Rod Cate and welcome to this week's episode of Rocket Motivation. This week's guest is a former collegiate and professional ice hockey goalie. He was first team All-American and played 8 seasons as a professional. He began experiencing anxiety, panic attacks, and depression. Things got to the point where in 2018 he was moments away from taking his own life. Since then, he has learned more about his own mental health issues and how to deal with them, and has devoted his life to helping others deal with and overcome their mental health issues. Chuck Thuss, welcome to Rocket Motivation.
Rod, thank you so much. It's my pleasure to be here.
Well, Chuck, kind of tell us where you are now in your life, where you live, family, what you do.
Life is pretty good for the most part because I've learned many different ways to make sure that I'm taking care of myself. But we're here in Mobile. My wife and I moved here back in 1997. And while we moved away for a little bit, we have found our way back. And I have 2 daughters, and they go to St. Paul's. And my wife and I both work in the financial industry, but I'm also a life coach and I'm a professional speaker and I'm in the midst of writing a book. So I do a lot of different things.
Okay. And we're going to circle back to the life coach, the book, and the speaking, because that's what we want to end with, so you can talk about that. But let's go back to the time when you were, your hockey playing days in college. So, tell us about that, and also talk about how you first began experiencing kind of some of the mental health issues, like maybe some of the anxiety and the panic attacks. So if you kind of weave that into your hockey playing career and how it all began.
Absolutely. So I started, like most young boys back in Canada, I started skating when I was 3 years old. And decided that I wanted to be a goalie when I was 4, and I was all in. There was nothing that mattered anything more than playing hockey, and I did everything else just because that was part of life. But it brought me to Miami University to play college hockey, and when I got there, Rod, I was doing pretty well. No signs of anything major. I was just a college kid working to play college hockey, but as I progressed through my freshman and into my sophomore year, I started to notice that I was struggling to take the knowledge that I had gained in the classroom to put it on paper when I needed to take an exam. That was back in the days when you and I would sit and actually write the tests out, right? Not on a computer. And so I found that no matter how much I studied, it didn't matter. I went to every class. I was really into my studies. I enjoyed school because I loved what I was studying. I was studying the history of sports and all of these different things. But I found it hard to take the knowledge from my head at an exam and put it on the paper. And when I looked at question 1, my mind would go blank. Question 2, my mind would go blank, and all of a sudden I could start to feel myself start to escalate, get frustrated, start to, get that mean and what's going on? Why can't I think of this? But back in the 90s, nobody ever told you what it was. It was just like, man, you got to push through. You got to figure out how to do this. Like, it, just get it out there. And it just didn't happen. So I spent a lot of time with my professors going through it. They would say the same thing, Chuck, I don't understand why you know this stuff. You just regurgitated the whole test to me standing here. Why can't you put it on paper? And I said, if I knew that, I would do it. So time went on and nothing more was said. I just kind of battled through and spent a lot of time with my professors. And as I progressed through, it really didn't show up on the ice. But when I left Miami and I went on to play professional, it started to find its way into my hockey game. And I would get sick before every game. Physically, I was sick. I was over the garbage can or over the toilet getting sick. And everybody just kind of laughed. They just thought it was part of what Chuck did. I had no idea why I was doing it. I was trying to relax before games, but I couldn't. My medical trainers, they just thought it was funny and never really investigated it. And one night I had a panic attack after warm-up. My heart was racing so fast, I thought I was going to have a heart attack. I was sweating profusely, couldn't get myself calmed down. So sure enough, I found myself on a gurney on my way to the hospital with all my goalie gear on and all kinds of stuff strapped to me. They're monitoring me. And in the morning, I spent the night at the hospital with my wife. And in the morning, they're like, Mr. Thuss, there's nothing wrong with you. You can just go home. And I'm like, there's nothing wrong with me? And they're, no, you're good. Go ahead. And so it really just continued on. My getting physically ill before games and even in games, sometimes I could feel my levels of arousal really getting out of control. And I just never thought anything of it. I would breathe a little bit, I'd skate around a little bit more, and all of a sudden I'd be okay. And when I retired from playing hockey, I thought, okay, I'm just going to leave this all behind me, right? Because it was only showing up at that point during when I was playing hockey. But sure enough, it would find its way into my personal life as well. And at that time, I was here in Mobile running a hockey business. I was selling hockey equipment all over the world. A natural fit, I guess, for a guy that was part of hockey his entire life, and not necessarily out of Mobile, Alabama, but it was going quite well. I had built it up to a multi-million-dollar business, but many days I was sitting at my desk, and all of a sudden, again, I would just start having panic attacks. No idea why, out of nowhere. Go to the doctor. They'd send me for a stress test. People at the hospital would be like, "There's nothing wrong with you. You get out of here."
Well, at some point, though, does the anxiety and panic attacks progress into depression?
It did.
Okay, tell us about that.
Yes, and so I started to live pretty much around the clock with anxiety. And as you said, then depression started to find its way in as well. And there were days, Rod, that I couldn't get out of bed. Many days. Many days I'd get out of bed, I couldn't move. I would be physically almost paralyzed from the anxiety, the depression, and I would just be crying. Uncontrollably, my wife would come over, "What's wrong?" I'd have no idea. I said, I can't move. I can't do anything. Neither one of us had any idea really what was going on and what was happening in my life. And it got so bad that it was really, like I said, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week for months and months and months on end. And it took everything I had just to function at a very low level. And I was trying to run a business. I was trying to be a husband. I was trying to be a father to 2 beautiful daughters. And I don't believe I was doing a job at any of them.
Right. Well, did you ever seek any professional help during this time?
I didn't. And that's where probably the way I was brought up really kicked in, because we were always taught as hockey players, I'm sure as you being a former football player, you're tough, you're rugged, push through, don't show your emotions, don't do this, don't do that, just go through the wall, do what you got to do to get through. And that was the mentality that I had. I can do this. I've done it all my life. I can just keep doing it. And so that's really what I tried to do. And little did I know that I was actually going backwards trying to do it. And in my mind, if I'm being honest too, all of these things that I had done, I was a collegiate All-American. I had a beautiful wife. I'd played 8 years professional. I was running a multi-million-dollar business. All of this outer stuff showed that Chuck had it all. He's living the American dream. He's got everything. But inside I was so empty and broken, I had nothing. And for me to tell people that was just like something I couldn't comprehend. I'm like, I don't know how I can even tell people that I'm in this place because I'm supposed to have it all.
Okay, so tell us what happens in 2008. You're driving back on I-10 to Mobile. Tell us what happened.
So in 2008, I'm on my way back from Biloxi to Mobile. And again, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week for months of living with anxiety and depression. And I had had enough. I knew there was no way out. I had no other way out. And I thought, if I can just drive my truck into that guardrail, make it look like an accident, I can be done. My family can go on. They can live without having to worry about me. I can be out of this pain that I'm in, and everything will be good. And down went my foot. And I was headed for that guardrail. And I was up to about 85 miles an hour, crying, and just knowing that this was it, that this is how it was going to end. And I can say that it's no other than God had me pull over. He took my foot off that gas and pulled over because I firmly believe he had another plan for my life that I had no idea what that plan was. And I reached in my pocket and I made that phone call for help. And what made me do that, Rod, to this day, other than God, I have no idea.
Well, let's talk about the phone call that you made and you reached in your pocket. What did you grab out of your pocket and who did you call?
There was a business card that my mom had given me 3 or 4 years earlier. A lady by the name of Sheila that was back in Ontario, Canada, not far from where I grew up. I'd never met the lady, but my mom told me, she's like, if you need anything in life, you call this lady. She will help you. She's wonderful. And I'm like, okay, that sounds good. And how many times back then did you get so many business cards and you just keep cleaning them out? You're like, I'm never going to use that one. So you just, whether you file it or you get rid of it or whatever, I always kept this card. And now I know why. But I reached in and I had no questions that that's who I was calling. And and I think back, and when I put myself in that position, even sitting here with you today, I reached in, pulled it out, didn't think twice, and I just dialed it. It rang 4 or 5 times, whatever, and she answered. And I just said, my name is Charles Thus. I said, you don't know me, but I don't want to live anymore. And the phone went silent. And I thought, it was one of those.
Wrong number.
And she says, you're going to be okay. And I said, I have no other option but to believe you, but I don't believe you. I said, because I'm not okay.
All right. Well, so then how do you turn it around?
Well, it was with her guidance, because we spoke many, many times for the next 8 years. She would walk with me on this journey. And many of them, Rod, as much as you would think that that's where probably the bottom was, I don't know that that's where the bottom was, because for probably many weeks for sure, maybe even a few months, she would talk to me every day, even on the hour, to try to get me through to the next hour. I was so filled with anxiety and depression that I couldn't function. And at that point, I still wasn't certain yet that I wanted to be here and that I could get through this, because it was not easy. I mean, I would cry for 8 to 10 hours a day, like just on some form or another. I'd be crying, whether it be a little bit, a lot, just trying to figure out what was going on. And she finally was able to help me get to a point that I was able to start to see a little bit of reprieve. And it was through some meditation, through some self-care that she would teach me, and just different modalities. And I did it all on the natural plane. Like I've never taken any medication for it. And some days I wonder if I should, because I'm still, I still have my ups and my downs, but I'm in a much better place to be able to deal with it. And I understand now what's happening. I can feel when the anxiety is starting to come on. I can feel when I'm starting to slide into a depression mode. I'm not quite able to stop the depression yet. I can slow the anxiety, but the depression, I just have to ride it out. And the spans have become much shorter, that it hangs around. I'm able to pull myself out of it. And a lot of it, again, is through self-care, through meditation, through just taking care of Chuck and making sure that Chuck is the number one person on his priority list. Because I've learned that if we don't take care of us, nobody else is going to.
So you've kind of taken what you've learned about yourself and you've become a life coach where you help others that are going through the same stuff you're going through. How did that happen?
Well, it was in 2016. I was having a conversation with the athletic director at the school that I attended college, and he reached out to me, Rod, and he says, Chuck, he says, you haven't been here, forever. He's like, you've always been a guy to come back to alumni events, and, you've always been a big part of Miami University and the hockey program. We miss you. What's going on? And before you knew it, I was sharing everything that happened, and he was the first person that I had told, other than my wife and the lady that I called to help save my life. And all of a sudden at the end of it, I said, I apologize. I said, I didn't mean to put all of that on you. And he says, I'm so grateful you did. He says, because I went through the same thing in high school. And instantly, like I was sharing with you prior, our relationship just took a whole different turn, and we've become so close and such good friends. But at the end of it, I said to him, by any chance, can a guy like me that has been through some stuff on the ice and a lot of stuff off the ice, can I help any of the athletes, say at Miami or any other college? And he says, Chuck, he says, do you know the number one issue in college athletics today? I've been pretty much living under a rock for 8 years. And I said, no, I haven't got a clue. He says, it's anxiety and depression. And he says, we really don't know how to deal with it. He says, because it's so widespread and so many kids are dealing with it on so many different levels. He says, we're not sure how to deal with all of it. He says, there's just so much of it. And I said, well, do you think I can help him? He says, if there's anybody in this world that can help him, it's you. He says, you've lived it. So I immediately went to work and started figuring out what that looked like. Was it going to be through, being a psychologist, a psychiatrist? What was I going to do? And after much research and looking into conversations with people, I landed on being a life coach, because what that means is I can deal with what's right here, right now in front of you. And we can figure out the best thing to do right here, right now for you to get to where you want to go. And if you're in a tough spot, a dark place, what can we do to help get you out of that right now? And yes, there's different times that we look back at what things may have caused this or where this may be coming from. But the majority of what we do is we work in the right here, right now to make sure that you can show up as the best version of yourself that you can be. And whatever that means for you, it doesn't have to mean it for anybody else, because everybody that I work with is just a little bit different.
Yeah, and that's what I was going to say. There can't be a one-size-fits-all to the people that I guess you mentor or you life coach or you just help get through whatever mental problems that they're having. But is there a central or a common, I guess, a theme or a common core to all of it but then you branch out? I mean, so what is that?
There really is, and there's 2 or 3 things that I really like to focus on. But then from there, like you said, everybody's a little bit different. And the one thing that I focus on immediately and we like to look at is your self-care. Are you taking care of yourself mentally, physically, and spiritually? And what does that mean for that individual person, because for everybody that's a little bit different. Sometimes it includes substance abuse, sometimes it doesn't. But sometimes it includes, are you eating well? Your diet. What does your diet look like? What you put in, you're going to get out. Are you getting enough rest? Are you getting enough hydration? The proper hydration, not out of the 12-ounce bottle. And then it's the practice of meditation. A lot of guys, when I ask them, and I say guys because the majority of the people that I'm working with at this present time are men, but I say, are you familiar with the practice of meditation? Well, I've heard of it. I said, are you open to learning more about it? Well, absolutely. Is it going to help me? I'm like, it's helped me a ton. So then I start to have the conversations around meditation and the power of that. And really, when you start with those things and then making yourself the most important person in your life, that making sure that what you need comes first. Because if you can't take care of yourself, like we had just mentioned, you can't take care of anybody else. If you can't make sure that you're filled up and your bucket is full, you can't help anybody else in their situations. You're going to show up to practice, you're not going to be your best self. You're going to show up to games, not be your best self, or to work, or to whatever it is that you're doing. If you're not taking care of you, then where you're going and what you're participating in, they're not getting the best you either. And in turn, you're really robbing life of your uniqueness. And then because you're not showing up as your best you. And I always like to say there's only one you, there's only one Rod Cate, there's only one Chuck Thus. Let's give the world the best that we have to offer. And if we can do that, then the gifts that we bring, we're going to make the world a better place, whatever that looks like.
I know you're helping a ton of people out. What does it do for you when you're one-on-one with somebody who is struggling with some depression, anxiety, panic attacks, whatever's going on in their life, and you're helping them out? What does it do for you?
Thank you for asking this, because I had this conversation a couple of weeks ago with a very close friend of mine, and I said, is it bad that I feel like I'm getting more out of these relationships than the people that I'm working with? And they said, that's when you know that it's a mutual thing. And that's when you know you're both getting a lot out of it, because I walk away and it reminds me of the things that I need to do, the importance of making myself number one. Because when I sit and I do, say, 4 or 5 one-on-one conversations per day, at the end of the day, I'm exhausted. And I need to make sure going into it that I have filled my cup up and that I'm full and ready to go. But on the backside of it, I need to make sure that I'm refilling myself and that I'm taking my personal time, that I take some time to meditate and get myself back centered and grounded, because you're dealing with a lot of different energy with these conversations and a lot of darkness, and it can be heavy. So I just have to really make sure that I'm taking care of me. But man, I get a lot out of it too. I really do. It's such a gift for me and for them. I like to think anyway.
Yeah. Well, and Chuck, based on what you've been through in your life, what have you learned about yourself?
I think that I'm pretty resilient. I knew for a long time that I had that in me, but I think just even as us as humans, we have a lot more resiliency in us. You know, a lot of times you'll hear people, I just can't keep going. You'd be amazed at how far that line will go when your back's against the wall, or when in a life or death situation, as you well know, you can really dig deep. But that resiliency and that heart connection that I love to make with people is incredibly powerful. And for me, that's what life is all about. When we can connect on that heart level, that's pretty special.
So Chuck, what advice would you give to people that are dealing with mental health issues that have not sought any help yet? I mean, what advice do you give to them?
First and foremost, I would tell them, Rod, that it's okay not to be okay, because it is 100%. Almost everybody on this planet is dealing with something. And I would ask you and even suggest and encourage you, make that call for help, because it takes incredible strength to do that. And you have that strength. Just pick that phone up and say, I need some help. That's all you have to do, whether it's to me or any other person that helps deal with this stuff. Make that call, because once you do, you've crossed that line. You're going to feel like the world has taken off your shoulders, and all of a sudden your life is going to take a turn for the much, much better. I promise you. It is life-changing when all you do is share it with somebody, because people are waiting to help. They really are.
What advice do you give to family members or friends of someone who's going through or experiencing some mental health issues? What advice do you give to them so they can help out?
Yes, just continue to support and love them. Let them know that they're doing well, that they're loved exactly how they are. Because for a long time, we think that there's something wrong with us, right? If we're dealing with anxiety, there must be something wrong with us. We're broken. We're not as good as everybody else. All of these false things that we think, just continue to reiterate them, how much you love them and support them, and you're there for them, and continue to just watch and monitor their behavior to make sure that they're not doing anything that's going to harm themselves. Because there's days, I still have them, that are very dark. Very dark. And not that I get into a place that I don't want to be here anymore or any of that, but some people do go there, especially at the beginning when they're starting this journey. So just keep an eye on them, let them know they're loved, but give them that alone time as well, because that is very, very important in the healing process.
All right, and so now I want to broaden it out a little bit. Because, Rocket Motivation, the theme of the podcast is all about overcoming adversity, and dealing with tough times in your life. What advice would you give, broadening it from just mental health issues, just, somebody that's going through some tough times, some adversity, based upon what you've been through in your life? What advice do you give to them?
I would tell them that you have tremendous greatness within you. We all do. And just dig a little bit deeper. Make yourself a little bit vulnerable to share what you're going through. Because once you surround yourself with an army of people, and that'll walk with you, not in front of you, not behind you, but will walk beside you, all of a sudden you start to get 1 or 2 or 3 people and you start locking arms, man, you can do anything in this world that you want to do. And once you see yourself going where you want to go, in your mind, means you can go there. And just lock your arms with people that believe in you, and that when you're down, will pick you up. And just keep going, because you can do it, whatever it is that you want to do in this world. As long as you put your heart and your mind and your soul to it, go do it, because you can.
All right, and Chuck, if somebody wants to get in touch with you to get you involved in their life to help them out, how do they do it?
You can reach out by email at chuck@thecompassionateconnection.com. My website is thecompassionateconnection.com. I'm also happy to give out my cell number if that's okay, and that is 251-680-5731. You can call me, text me, whatever, email me. It doesn't matter how you get a hold of me, but I'm on Facebook, I'm on Instagram, all the different social media platforms. But please just reach out, and just all you have to do is open that heart, and let's make a heart connection, because you don't have to do this alone. I often say, Rod, that if God designed this whole world, this whole journey that we go through, that we're supposed to do it alone, he wouldn't have designed it the way he designed it. We're not supposed to do it alone. We're in this thing together. There's 8 billion of us on the planet. We're all in this together. Even though we don't feel like we're, a lot of the times, we are. Just find some of the people out of that 8 billion that want to walk the journey with you, and go do it, and do it together, because it makes it a lot more powerful, empowering, and a lot more meaning when you can do it with somebody else.
And let's talk about the book you're writing. Well, I would assume it's going to be based upon what we've talked about, but tell us a little bit about it.
It is, and I'm sharing my journey just as much as I did here with you today, and giving some insights on the things that I went through, and that kind of put me into a dark place, and probably some of the practices, maybe for lack of better terms, that I got into when I was dealing with anxiety, when I didn't know what it was called, the overconsumption of alcohol being one of them. I, like a lot of college kids, was on it all the time. And I wasn't doing it necessarily to fit in or to be part of the college scene. I was doing it to deal with the anxiety that I was feeling. So I talk a lot about that. I talk a lot about the different things that you can do to make sure you're showing up as the best version of yourself you can be. And I really try to make it a book that allows people to maybe say, you know what, that's me. That's who I am, or that's who I was. I did the same things that Chuck is doing. And if he did that and he's writing a book about it, my gosh, maybe I can just pick up the phone and say, hey, I'm not okay and I need some help. Not that they have to write a book and tell the world, but maybe it's going to inspire them to ask somebody to walk the journey with them and ask them for help.
Okay, so Chuck, I know you've also got a podcast, so tell us about that.
I do, and former NHL goalie and I, Clint Malarchuk, we teamed up about a year ago, and it's called Warriors Unmasked. And Clint also has dealt with a lot of mental illness issues, and so we wanted to really put a spotlight on that and show people just how common it is. So we built our podcast around courage and perseverance and mental health. And we have met some absolutely amazing people. And you can find it on any of the major platforms. And I would love for your listeners to check us out and even give us a follow and hopefully give us some feedback, because we'd love to hear from you.
Okay, awesome. It sounds great. Now, what's the name of it again?
It's called Warriors Unmasked.
All right, Chuck, I always do this on my show. I give the guest a parting shot. I know there's some wisdom in your brain that we have not discussed, that we need to get it out. We need the listeners to hear it. So what is the final thought from Chuck thus today?
I would probably say that you're not alone. And regardless of what you're going through, you're not alone. And so many of us think we are. And find that one or two people that want to walk this journey with you. And they're out there, even though you think they may not be. Find those one or two people, lock arms with them, and walk that journey. Just keep putting one foot in front of the other. Because regardless of how dark the day is, I promise you, if you keep putting one foot in front of the other, it's going to get better. The light's going to get brighter. And there is hope at the end of the tunnel. I promise you. Because speaking from a guy that thought that light was burned out and that it was never coming back on, I found that little glimpse of hope, and I just hung on for dear life, and I allowed Sheila to walk me closer and closer to that light, and she brought me to it. And there's somebody waiting to do the same thing for you, and let them make that heart connection. Open up that heart, because that's what it's all about. When you can make that connection, there's nothing more powerful in this world, and it is a gift from above.
Chuck, I want to thank you so much for coming on the show today. It's my pleasure having you here. Your story's great, and I know the listeners are going to get a lot out of this.
Thank you, my friend. I appreciate you having me.
Great episode with Chuck Thus, coming to terms with his mental illness and using how he copes to help others going through the same thing. Just a great story. Next week's guest is Dr. Albert Russell. He's the head of the Department of Chemistry at Tuskegee University, but he's going to talk about how he got there and how he has navigated life's ups and downs. Going to be a great episode. See you next week. Thanks for listening to the show. If you're interested in getting my book, Get Back Up, just go to Amazon and put in Get Back Up and my name, Rod Cate, and it'll pop right up. I would love it if you would subscribe to the podcast and rate and review the show wherever you listen to your podcasts. I would really appreciate it if you'd share it with a friend. I would like as many people to hear my message as possible. Never give up and always get back up. And we'll see you next week.